So we've determined that it wasn't Al-Qaeda. We've determined that there must have been some pre-planning. I've said that the leaseholder had certain incentives, 7.5 billion of them, to see those buildings come down. From the power angle, there's elements within the American government, predominantly Republican, that formed the Project for a New American Century in 1997. In the year 2000, this think tank wrote a report called Rebuilding America's Defenses, in which they discussed how they wanted to get into Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, etc., to secure energy concerns, to secure specific geopolitical areas that were important for their plan, essentially to extend U.S. Global hegemony. And in this report, again, year 2000, they said that they had one problem, that it was going to be tough to get support for this plan, at least at the pace that they wanted to execute it, without a new Pearl Harbor in which to catalyze the American public support. And lo and behold, in 2001, they got their new Pearl Harbor. Military contractors, of which Dick Cheney, who is a member of PNAC, Dick Cheney, his connections to Halliburton are fairly widely known. Military contractors received billions, if not trillions, of dollars from the American government via or I should say the American taxpayers via the American government. None of the taxpayers who would challenge this type of money or this foray into the Middle East and the loss of life, both American and innocents over there, given that what happened on September 11th and who the blame was laid at. And it's a troubling conclusion, because I guess what I'm saying, I'm not saying that it was an inside job, but what I'm saying is that there are people who are not Al-Qaeda who stood to benefit from the collapse, the demolition of those buildings that day, and the loss of life. And unfortunately, there are some of the leaders that people have voted for, at least on the American side, that I think are involved. And the reason I bring this up is that I just find that it's important when you're faced with the facts to not excuse them away. It's tougher to face an uncomfortable truth than it is to accept a sort of a flimsy excuse and move on with your life. I realize that we're busy, we're working, we have families, we get up early, we come home late, we're tired, we just want to put our feet up. So we take what we get from the media, and that becomes our water cooler talk for the next day. All I'm saying is that it's good to use a discerning eye when you watch the news, when you read what you read. Don't get too caught up in emotion. Just basically to walk through life with your eyes open and not with your eyes closed, because ignorance is bliss, but I don't think it's a very truthful way to live. Again, I'm not a very serious guy. I love to laugh. I love to have a good time. Life for me is mostly about having a good time, but I also like to know the world that I live in, and really that's why I'm bringing this information to you. So in closing, I just want to preface here. The BBC video is coming up. This is again another eyebrow raiser. It really can't be excused away. If you haven't seen this before, on September 11th at about 5 p.m., BBC aired a video of a report live from a reporter in New York City telling the anchor back in London that World Trade Center 7 had collapsed. And the only problem with that was that the building was yet to collapse for another 25 minutes. How BBC knew, I'm not sure, but in Monty Python-esque fashion, when the female reporter was giving her report, you could see World Trade Center 7 in the background. There's a million and one eyebrow raisers when it comes to 9/11. STRAWMAN@Rogers.com if you want to talk about it. I appreciate all the feedback via YouTube, Facebook. But again, just put a smile on your face and have yourself a great day. Thanks again for listening.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago, I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. But this isn't the first building that has suffered as a result. We know that part of the Marriott Hotel next to the World Trade Center also collapsed as a result of this huge amount of falling debris from 110 floors of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city, but completely disappeared now, and New York is still unable to take on board what has happened to them today.
Presumably there were very few people in the Salomon building when it collapsed. I mean, there were, I suppose, fears of possible further collapses around the area.